Simon Bartholomew of Brand New Heavies, thanks very much for talking to us today and fitting us in. The first thing to come to, of course, is, the 30 years of brother sister, right? So how does that feel to you? You wake up some mornings and think, blimey, 30 years, like where do they go? Have we got like different perspectives on that?
Well, I think anyone who gets older, you suddenly you start saying, "Oh, that was 5 years ago," and it's actually 10, 15. It's like a sort of conceptual thing in life. Um, all I can say is it's an album that was our first album when we were like had made become like professional. It's a word I wouldn't call myself, but technically
Yeah,
professional. But we're still playing funky tracks and doing stuff and like it's all a bit of a laugh still, you know. And so it's quite a nice album to hear. It's quite eclectic because it's everything from reggae to sort of weird sort of punk popish things in fake and then
yeah,
disco and all sorts of stuff on there. So we were just enjoying all that, you know, with Endear because Endear had joined the band,
yeah,
re-singing the first album, and so now we're writing with Endear as well. So she's having her input, and we're all getting it's all lovely, and we're all getting on great, and it's all good. So I think there's a nice energy in the record, and I think that sort of endured. I also
yeah,
think that like live music, for me personally. Although I love hip hop and I love all sorts of music, is the most enduring music and my go-to to listen to. So I think that the album has that sort of thing, and maybe that's for other people too, you know.
yeah. I mean, it's interesting you talk about music. We'll come on to that in a bit because I know I've been digging around looking up some stuff this morning. Um, what's your memories of Giles Peterson and Eddie Pillar in the kind of the early days of acid jazz, and how influential were they in where we are now, looking back at an album 30 years later?
Well, what it was is I met Jan at infant school and we were like best mates. High school, Jan and Andrew, that's the drummer and bass player of the band, we're best mates. And then I went to like art college, and me and Andrew like were best mates. And at art college, I was more into rock and other sort of stuff, really, and
Yeah,
like reggae and
yeah,
cosmic music and things like that, and some jazz and things. And you know, I was into all sorts, but I wasn't really into the funk so much, you know, and everything. Anyway, they'd met this guy, and he started this company called the Cat in the Hat. And before that, or around that time, we were going to Dingwalls on a Sunday, which was also Patrick Ford's Giles Peterson. And so, and Eddie was doing a more of a mod thing.
yeah, yeah. Because it came out of mod a little bit, didn't it? Sort of,
Yeah, it
it's
did.
kind of
Yeah,
a
and,
link,
and
isn't it?
he was the guy that was like he sort of like Froggy. He was a massive DJ, and soul music actually became something that was very like pirate radio onto Radio One with Greg Edwards and all these other DJs. That was a bit before, but this more digging into sort of more obscure music like Northern Soul and funk
Mm.
was quite a UK original thing before the hip hop guys were looking for breaks and everything, which actually aligned it all together eventually. But you know, it's funny to see because really it was a niche thing about the love of music. Rather than trying to make it with that, it was
Mm.
about providing for people who wanted to hear it. So that you went to Dingwalls every Sunday, and I'd never danced before, and heard like jazz and people jumping over their feet, and
Yeah,
it was, you know, it wasn't like there was no We Are Family. Let me tell you that. It
yeah.
was, you know, mostly sort of jazz and really far out music,
So,
and so quite in at the deep end as a non-dancer.
yeah, I
And
can't
but
dance.
I read his book, and he was finding venues and putting nights on, you know.
Yeah, he was really
And that's the
influential, wasn't
beginning
he?
of raves and house music and everything. That's the sort
Yeah.
of it's the steps towards like to what we are all more familiar with now.
And of course you're a guitarist, so and I had one of the things I looked at earlier, which is really interesting to me, was I was looking at the nine songs thing. The nine songs
Yeah,
where you but both kind of chose your favorite songs, and I was
yeah.
really surprised. This geezer crops up.
Elvis
Yeah,
Presley. Well,
which I
when I
would
was a
never have
kid,
heard in the Brand New Heavies at all, but it's in you somewhere, isn't it?
that's really well said, and it very much is because when I was about 12, I sort of fell in love with rock and roll, and obviously there was like no there was like, I think Capital had started maybe then. I made a show called Cruising,
Mm.
which is like a rock and roll show on a Friday for like half an hour. And that was a go-to for me. And it was this distant American thing. So I loved Eddie Cochran, Gene Vincent, Little Richard,
Yeah,
Fats Domino, it's fantastic music. It still the records sound absolutely Chuck Berry. Just, without Chuck Berry, there's no Beatles.
yeah.
That's that. I mean, that is that. So, and I love that music. And it was hard to find or see. And when I was at school, I was like greasing my hair back. I'd wear like luminous socks. I
Uh,
finally got a pair of Creepers from Shelley's shoes. And we had a penny disco at school.
wow.
And I'll tell you what time it was. It was when the Kung Fu Fighting was out by
Oh
Cardiff.
yeah,
And then at the end, they'd play like a few rock and roll songs and we'd do the bop. So I had
yeah.
started dancing.
All right.
And
Wow.
but I love that music and you can learn to play it. So I got a guitar for my birthday and you know, I'm gonna read it first, and stuff like that. And
Yeah.
that was
Great,
stuff
great
was like
songs. Yeah. Yeah.
electrifying to me. I mean, it was like
Mm.
chills up the back of the spine, neck, or whatever it's called, hairs on the back of the spine.
But how was that which is great, but how is that transition for you as a musician into playing this really kind of soulful, funky stuff, you know?
Well, my dad had a lot of blues records, and he was a
Mm.
big fan of Leadbelly and a big fan. And he put the records on, and he wouldn't just put them on. He'd say like, "Listen to this," and you go, "Yeah," and you get really into it. He's a big fan of Louis Armstrong as well, but
Yeah.
only up. He was a purist, so only up until like 1927.
Okay.
Hot five, hot sevens with Lil Hardin and all the guys. And so in a way, I have the same background as like the Yardbirds and stuff, because this is the sort of Rock Hard and Live was written by Leadbelly, which is done by Lonnie Donegan,
I didn't
which
know that.
started the movement, which
Uh,
started Led Zeppelin and actually the Yardbirds, probably more notably, who
Clapton,
had
yeah.
Jeff Beck,
Mm.
Jimmy Page,
Mm.
and Eric Clapton. So that's a sort of like a bit of a lineage there, and then you rock and roll, and then like you sort of then I got into like I don't know. I had an older brother, so there's Led Zeppelin, there's punk around, there's all sorts going on.
Yeah.
And so the
Hendrix, of
sort of more
course.
rocky thing, and Hendrix is like,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
favorite of mine. And so all that I got into that sort of stuff. And then when I met Jan and Andrew, they were like they didn't really like rock. In fact, at school we used to joke and have a joke called rock versus soul. They
Yeah.
saw soul as but really I was listening to like fucking Genesis, which is like super
Wow.
complicated.
Okay.
Yes, and Gong, an amazing band, which is veering on jazz. The drummer was phenomenal.
Mm.
And so I had all that stuff. And then, so I was in this band called Coke Bottle Willie at school.
Great
And we
name.
actually got our own gigs. We played at the Clarendon, which is on Hammersmith Roundabout,
Mm.
a few times. I don't know how we got there, how we got the gig. I've no idea. And put our own gigs on and did a gig in the school. And then I met Jan and Andrew and I started playing. I had to basically strip my whole guitar playing down and relearn.
Yeah.
The style, which is instead of like big bar chords, I like to use Steve Cropper's guitar part in Green Onions as an example of space because that song,
Yeah.
that's what,
Yeah. Yeah. What a great
without
point.
that part, it's
Yeah.
not the same record.
No.
And I realized that there was something in that, and it's more percussive playing, really, and a
Yeah.
more
I mean,
bass-led music. So that's what happened. They ruined me.
yeah. Well, I mean, Levi as a bass player is like fairly awesome bass player. Yeah. And
Mm.
you work off each other, I suppose, over the years. Yeah. Is that when you're
Well,
songwriting? Does it come to that?
when we first started, we actually made a cassette and
Mm.
took it to this club called the Cat and the Hat, which is in Leicester Square. And bear in mind, we were very young, and we would go up to London to this place and get in because we met the guys, and they started coming to the drummer's house every Sunday, which we'd go every Sunday. Thanks to Jan's parents for letting us do that, and we just jammed for hours until we found a sort of
Yeah.
the groove.
Mm.
Actually, people talk about the groove, and I was saying one definition of the groove is you might all be playing, and then suddenly everything's like, oh, there it is. Let's remember that as it is there.
Yeah.
So you might be going diddly ding, going ding ding, diddly, and you might go ding 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 diddly ding. Oh, then that's the one, and
Yeah.
it kind of looks like a puzzle. It's sort of almost mathematical.
Yeah.
Like if you listen to James Brown records, the
Yeah.
parts on their own are very simple, but together they make
Yeah.
this funk, super funk, you know.
Yeah. It's like everyone knows what they're doing, so the whole, it becomes the whole, doesn't it? All those kind
Mm,
of simple parts put together just become the whole thing. Yeah,
mm.
which is really cool.
Yeah. So yeah. So that's how I sort of came from the rock and roll through it all
Yeah.
into like the funk, you know,
Yeah.
and I do enjoy all the music, so I'm quite glad of that.
Did you write the lyrics to Apparently Nothing?
Apparently, nothing was actually originally by the young disciples,
Okay. Okay. Right. Great.
and Carly and
Great.
Anderson would have written those lyrics. Yeah,
So those lyrics, right? Because if you had written those lyrics, excuse my ignorance, but those lyrics, I thought, blimey, if there's any song which says everything that's going on today, isn't it?
yeah. I
You know,
mean, a song like that is just like timeless, really.
but the
As
political kind of message of it.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, Carlene. Um, we're from Ealing, like Jamiroquai and the Young Disciples, and I think because we started doing stuff, people were like, "Well, these are our mates; they're doing it. We can have a go at this sort of thing." And Femi, who was one half of the Young Disciples, with brother Marco, who's played with like Paul Weller and all sorts of people subsequently.
Hmm.
And they were putting on this club night called Shake and Finger Pop, and it was getting into bigger venues. So the funk was going from little places and becoming more popular. Went to the WAG, and then it got bigger. And they put on a concert at the Town and Country. I couldn't. I was away on holiday with my family. I was gutted, and they brought the JBs over,
Oh
who
wow.
brought over Vicky Anderson's daughter, Carlene, and that's how they met her really. And she sort of didn't really want to do funk so much. She wanted to sort of get away from her mum's legacy.
Oh yeah.
But she got a chance to be in this scene and voice some great stuff, and she's a phenomenal singer.
Yeah. You have worked with some amazing singers, haven't you?
Mm,
Actually,
incredible, yeah.
all the way through. My cat was moving around then on the keyboard. I got a keyboard in front of me as well. A proper kind of what is it, a Korg or something. So my cat's moving around on the Korg
Oh, nice.
keyboard.
Okay. Oh, yeah. You should record it. Cat
Yeah,
Jam.
that would be jazz, wouldn't it? What about obviously you're playing at the Tramshed, this weekend in Cardiff. Which I don't know if you've played the Tramshed before.
No, I don't think so. No.
It's a really cool venue, actually. It's probably what I think it's one of my favorite venues in Cardiff. It's a mid to large size venue, so you'll probably enjoy that. But that's so that's happening this weekend. Obviously, we're going to give that a plug for you on Keep Cardiff Live later on. But you were talking about it a little bit earlier on. We talked a little bit about Albert Hall and it being really special, and I suppose when I first came across Brand New Heavies, which would have been about 30 years ago, actually, with Red Dragon, a commercial station. I actually, for me, it was like dance, it was like pop, it was that kind of thing. I didn't pick up on the acid jazz, and I didn't pick up on the lyrical content enough. But the people who did are the ones who were really, stuck with you all the way through, and they really get what you're about. And you were talking about it a bit earlier, but playing the Albert Hall is a really special thing, not just for if I can put it this way, not for just for those kind of pop fans, but for the people who really get it.
Well, yeah. I mean, like, I'll just say it again now that when we first played the Albert Hall, we had stuff in the charts, and probably a number of people there were there because they went to see the latest stuff that was going on. But to be selling it out this time,
Yeah.
our fans, and that's a different sort of a ticket, and it's I'm truly grateful, and I intend to give it the best shot ever. Because we have
Yeah.
a 26-piece orchestra there, and like
Wow.
guests coming up, Omar Snowboy, Tony Monreal, who's played with Incognito, sang with Incognito a lot. Um, and James Taylor of the James Taylor Quartet, who used to
Wow.
headline. We support him
Wow.
back in the early days.
So I know Paul Carr a bit, who played guitar with the James Taylor Quartet. Do you know Paul?
I don't meet that many guitarists because I'm always the guitarist. You see.
Well, Paul is he was a lecturer. I was a lecturer. I recently retired, but he was a lecturer with me at my university, Geordie guy, and one of the finest musicians, just ridiculously good guitarist. I mean, within your field, you think about when we talked about Hendrix, we talked about rock and roll, etc. earlier. Within your field, in a more of a subtle way, maybe if I ask you this as a guitarist and a musician, guitar is like a really significant ingredient within the genre of music that you do. Is that a difficult question for you to answer as a guitarist?
Well, no, I think it's really a crucial instrument because I think James, if you listen to James Brown before he went to Africa, probably for the Rumble in the Jungle, um, he was doing more rock and roll, really, like R&B, sort of as it was known, as I
Yeah,
know it, sort of
yeah,
thing.
of course.
And then he heard Fela Kuti and really changed his whole thing. Because if you listen to the guitar playing in Fela Kuti records, then suddenly you got tick, 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 and repetitive grooves,
Mm.
and it's like melodic. It's setting the tone, tick, 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 and like
Oh
tick,
yeah,
getting soul power, tick, 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 tick. But it's more like a horn line. It's more like a
yeah, yeah.
someone playing some cabaret. Dung, 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 dung. It's more percussive. So it's like crucial in its percussive melodicness. Um, and of course, there's a kind of interesting time of the Hendrix influence on funk. Some of the, I think, let's take it to the stage, Parliament Funkadelic.
Yeah,
I might just be Funkadelic at that point. You can hear like this big influence of Hendrix and funk as well.
yeah.
And then the Isleys obviously put it into their thing. So, they're quite well, very well.
And in that nine songs thing that I mentioned, you chose a Hendrix track that I wasn't actually that familiar with, but it was like if you remember, it was kind of a
Mm.
softer one. Is that kind of
Yeah, that
sort of
that
fit?
song is also very
Yeah,
relevant today.
yeah,
Um, and I chose that because I wanted to play some Hendrix, and I thought I'd go in a bit easier and a bit jazzier in the sort of realm of a Heavies fan, perhaps, and play something a bit unusual
yeah,
rather than sort of All Along the Watchtower or something more familiar, Purple Haze or something like that.
yeah.
And it's a beautiful song by a guy who was also massively like broad in his influences and tastes. I read that he was a big Bob Dylan fan.
Was he really?
I'm
I never
massively
knew that.
covered All Along the Watchtower and a couple of other things that
Oh, of
never got
course,
released.
yeah, yeah.
And he said he
Oh,
took a Bob Dylan album once to this sort of club in Harlem, and
hmm.
they're like, "What's this stuff? We don't get it because the voice isn't. It's not like a soul voice or anything like that." But that's how he started writing things like "The Wind Cries Mary," because it's more lyrical and more about the song, and more about poetry or intimating atmospheres and not just saying things directly. Footprints dressed in red and things like that.
Yeah, yeah,
It's sort of imagery, isn't it? And what does it mean? And you'll never know. And the millions of interpretations of like Beatles songs or all sorts of songs. He was going down that road a bit, along with his Foxy Lady, which is like a sort
yeah,
of
yeah,
hey, which is
yeah.
another sentiment. And in the human experience, we have all those things going on, I think, in ourselves throughout the day.
What a profound comment that is. I mean, I know,
Yeah,
like a light comment, but it's a really profound comment. And I think in
yeah,
a way
yeah,
it
yeah.
kind of I know you got to get away in a bit. Um, but it kind of really ties in a way sort of transcends the conversation that we just had. Because,
Mm.
if you listen in a one dimensionally to a style of music, then it leads you into a certain kind of tier of questions and territory, But actually, it's way more kind of intricate and nuanced and layered, isn't it? What Brand New Heavies do and what the band's about, actually.
Well, yeah, yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think with a band, you have everyone coming together, bringing their personal backgrounds of music, and what their parents played, and it all goes in.
Yeah,
Um, and you're hearing that, but not directly,
Yeah, well, not
But
at all
you're
directly.
hearing like, I wonder if there is some sort of Eddie Cochran or Gene Vincent in,
Yeah, yeah,
or you know, the who's the guitarist, Scotty Moore, you know,
yeah.
great player.
Wow.
That was one
Yeah.
of the first albums I had, the Sun Sessions, um, which is sort of almost rockabilly-esque. Blue Moon, I keep it shining bright.
I love that song,
Good. Great
actually.
album.
Yeah.
And that stuff I did love. I like the energy in it. That sort of like, yeah, it was funky, you know, it was dancey. It was like,
Yeah.
you know, and all those records are kind of dance records as well, in a way. That rock and roll stuff is um, social music, you know, it was social commentary. Eddie
Yeah.
Cochran stuff, you know, Summertime Blues is about,
Yeah.
you know, really like well, it was the first time teenagers had had a voice, and it's a big threat to America. They shut down stations, put people in prison, DJs, because they didn't want this music to be heard. Black music, evil, you know. That so it's like rebel music as well,
Yeah.
of sorts.
Well, it kind of takes us back to apparently nothing in a way as well, because at the time, if I'm honest with you, Simon, when I just listened to the groove, I just listened to it as a kind of a dance tune, you know.
Yeah, it works on
And
that level as well. That's the great thing about it.
yeah, yeah, it's almost subliminal, isn't it?
I,
Them
like, when
kind
I
of
was younger, I was more into the music than the lyrics, and now I'm the same as you.
yeah,
The lyrics, I'm like, I listen to those more.
yeah. So
I've
it's
got,
it
you know, found those, which is a great thing about music because it can keeps throughout your life. You know, the same stuff can be completely different and sort of refreshed and renewed in some way. Don't you
yeah,
think?
yeah. And I think the subtlety of it, you know, the kind of slow burner stuff is kind of more effective in a way than the really overt stuff, you know.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. True, very true.
Fantastic talking to you. I know you've got to go to a health and fitness class now. You know, get the old going.
Get my six pack so I can go topless at the Albert Hall.
Which is a great
I'm just
ambition,
joking.
isn't it?
If I do it, then
Yeah.
it'll be I've got this expression. You've heard of mutton dressed as lamb.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
Well, I'm mutton dressed as glam
Oh, fantastic.
because you know, reaching the ripe old age of 59 and a quarter, still feeling quite bouncy and
Yeah. If you starting to count the quarters, you know, things are starting to matter, you know.
yeah, 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 yeah. Adrian Mole, the Diary of Adrian Mole.
Yeah, exactly. Simon, I'm gonna get out of your way because I know you're busy, but a really, really great chatting with you. Good luck
Well,
in
listen, we've
Cardiff
got to talk
tomorrow.
again because we could probably talk for like 2 hours
Yeah,
and edit it into a three-parter,
we'll, we'll,
five-parter.
I'd love to do that. But maybe
Brilliant questions as well,
set it
I've
up.
got to say, really good. I'll
Thank
give
you,
you my email as well because I'd love to talk to you again.
Simon. Thanks very much. Great to talk to you. And please do drop me an email. I'll give, Rob's got my email address anyway.
Great, yeah,
I'll
yeah.
drop you an email straight away, actually. I'll drop you an email
Yeah,
straight
shoot
away.
me one and send me the show and make sure it gets passed on to me as well because I'll definitely forward it to our socials.
Thanks,
Yeah, thank you
Simon.
so much. Thanks for your
Great chatting
time.
to you. Cheers, man. Thank you.
Yeah,
See you
cheers.
soon,
Yeah,
hopefully.
plug the
Yes,
show more as well. Plug the show.
I will do, yeah. Cheers,
Yeah,
man.
love
Thank
it.
you.